In this video, you're going to learn how to manipulate your arrays. So we'll figure out how we can add new items, remove items, or replace existing ones. And we're really just going to be running through a series of methods on the array. The array has a ton of very useful methods, so we're going to be able to tackle quite a few in just a single video. Let's go ahead and kick things off by talking about how we can add a new item right on to the end of the array. So we got our list of notes. We could imagine that the user does something like submits a form with a new note. We get that string value and we want to add it on to the list. How do we do that? Well, we use the array push method. Let's go ahead and explore that. Before we do, I'm going to tweak this last line. Instead of printing the second to last item, I'm going to print the entire array so we can see how our method calls actually change things. Right here, we're going to make changes to notes. Now let's go ahead and use push first. That is notes. Dot. The method is push. Does it take an argument? Yes, it does. It needs to know what item you want to add on. So if I wanted to add a number onto the end of the list, I would type a number, like 12. If I want to add a string on, which I do, we create a string and pass it in as the first and only argument. Now we can go ahead and provide the text for this note. Let's call it something like my new note. So there we have it. We have our very first method in place. Now we can run the script and see how this method changes the array. Node notes from the terminal. When I run it, what do I get? I see I now have a length of 4 up from 3, and I can see my new item right on the end. This is the item that didn't exist when I first initialized the array, but was added later via a method call. Now push adds something on to the end. We can also remove something from the end. This is done via push's companion called pop. Let's go ahead and explore that. And as always, there's going to be a list of all of the methods we discussed in this video in the PDF guide for the course. So make sure to check that out, and also make sure to open up the documentation so you can actually explore the list of methods over there in the sidebar. Now, this is notes.pop, and it allows us to remove the last item from an array. So does it take any arguments? No, it just takes an action. It removes that last item. And if we were to save things, we could see how this plays out. We would expect that it removes note 3 and then adds my new note. Over in the terminal, if I do rerun the notes script, that's exactly what I get. So pop removes an item from the end, push adds a new one. Now with pop, we actually do get the removed item back as the return value. So imagine we're creating a web app and someone deletes a note and we say a little message like, you just removed, and then we provide the note text. We could also have something like an undo button in case they clicked the wrong one. To use the removed value, all we have to do is store it in a variable or just add it to a console.log call. It's the return value from pop. So I'm just going to print it to the screen, console.log. Then at the very end of that line, I'm going to close that parenthesis. Excellent. So now we're removing and printing the last item and then adding a new one. If we run it, the final array is going to look exactly the same. The only difference is that we're now seeing the removed item up above. So the push and pop method focus on manipulating the array from the end. We have two other methods that focus on manipulating the array from the start. This is shift and unshift. Let's go ahead and explore how both of those work. So the shift method removes the very first item from your array. It works exactly the same as pop, where it returns the removed item. So I could add a console.log call. I could call notes.shift, passing in no arguments, and this is going to have the effect of removing note 1. If I run the script in its current state, we can see at the end we just have two notes. We have note 2 and my new note. Note 1 is now gone. Now, much like we have push to add an item on to the end, we also have unshift to add an item on into the beginning. That is notes dot unshift, and we pass in the thing we want to add. So I could say something like my first note, since it's going to get tacked right on the beginning. If I save the notes file and rerun things, what do we get? We get my first note showing right up at the beginning. So these are 4 common methods for manipulating your arrays. You have push and pop for the end of the array, and you have shift and unshift for the beginning of the array. Now, aside from manipulating an array from either the beginning or the end, there are other methods that allow us to do something from the middle of the array. The one I want to explore, which is a little complex, is called splice, and we can actually find it over in the list. Let's go ahead and pull it up real quick. So splice is going to allow us to add elements to the middle of an array or remove elements from anywhere in our list. It takes a couple of arguments, so let's go ahead and explore both of those. We're going to use it over inside of Visual Studio Code. Right here, let's use notes.splice. The first argument to splice is where you're trying to take the action. So are you trying to start at the second item, the first item? You need to provide the index. So to simplify this little example, for the moment, let's comment out all of the lines we have up above. I'm using command / or Windows / depending on your keyboard setup. So now we're just working with the basic array. We know exactly what's inside of it. So with splice, let's say we're trying to remove that middle item. So we provide the index, the starting point, in this case, 1. If I wanted to start at the beginning, I would use an index of 0. So we're going to start at 1, and the second argument we provide is the number of things we're interested in removing. So we can remove 0, we can remove 1, we could remove 2. For the moment, let's just remove a single item. So this has the effect of saying start at index of 1 and remove 1 item. So it goes to the index of 1 and it removes this item. If I passed in 2 as the second argument, it would remove this one and this one. I'm going to save the file and rerun things from the terminal so we can see what we get. Over here, what do we get? We get note 1 and then we get note 3. Now, you might be asking, why would you ever provide 0 as the second argument? This basically does nothing. It says, hey, start at 1 and then delete nothing. Well, that's because the next argument, if you want to provide it, allows you to add an item at that point in time. So let's say I do want to add a new item as the second item in my array. All I do is I provide 0 right there. Then I can go ahead and provide the new item. This is the new second item. So the functionality of this method call isn't going to delete anything up above. All it's going to do is add this as the second item to the list. It's going to move note 2 to the third and note 3 to the fourth. Let's see this in action. I'm going to rerun things from the terminal. The output is getting a bit long, so let's use clear to clear things up, and then the up arrow key twice to rerun the previous command. I get note 1. This is the new second item, note 2, and note 3. So this allows us to put an item somewhere in the list. Now we know how to delete an item and we know how to add a new item. You can actually combine both of them to replace an item. So I could say start at item 1, delete 1 item, then add this. This is going to have the effect of completely replacing note 2. We can run the script to prove it. Over here, we get note 1, we get this is the new second item, and we get note 3. Note 2 is no longer anywhere in sight. So we're going to be using these methods quite a bit to manipulate our arrays. We can actually also change the value of a given item using bracket notation. So let's go ahead and comment out this line as well. And down below, we're going to explore just one more thing. We know that we can read a value with bracket notation, meaning that I can access from the notes array the first item using my square brackets and the index of 0, 1 for the second and 2 for the third. Now, not only can I read a value, I could actually assign a new value. So I could set the item at the index of 2 equal to a new string. This is now the new note 3. This is going to have the effect of replacing whatever value was at that position. So it's very similar to what we did up above. If I save things and rerun things, what do we get? We get note 1 and note 2, and then where note 3 should be, we actually get our new value. This is now the new note 3. So splice is great when you're trying to remove items. It's also nice when you're trying to remove and add. But if you're just trying to swap out one item for another, you can use the basic old bracket notation to get that done. Now it's challenge time. Using what you learned here, I want you to make some changes to our to-dos array. I'm going to remove the comments from the previous challenge, and I'm going to tweak these console.log calls. We can remove the to where we print an individual to-do from the list. We'll bring that functionality back in later. And all I'm going to do is dump the whole list so we can actually see how our method calls are changing things. Then we can remove some of those empty lines. And what you're going to do is add a few different calls right here. The first thing you're going to do is delete the third item. So using what you learned, I want you to delete the third item. For me, that would be buy food. The next thing you're going to do is add a new item onto the end. You can have this be whatever you want, whatever new to-do you have in mind. And then the last thing you're going to do is remove the first item from the list. So all in all, I'm removing buy food and order cat food and adding something new on to the end. Go ahead and take as much time as you need to get this done, and you can refer back to the notes file should you forget how things work. If you want even more information, feel free to dive over to the MDN documentation and look up the details of any of the methods we've explored. Pause the video, and when you're done, come back and click play. All right, how'd that one go? I'm going to kick things off by deleting the third item. The best way to get this done is going to be to use the splice method. So right here, you wanted to use todos.splice. Todos.splice is going to take a few different arguments. First up, where are we starting from? I want to delete that third item by food. It has the index of 2, so I provide 2 right here. Now I provide the number of items I want to delete. In my case, I'm just trying to delete an individual item, so it would be 1. I'm not adding anything new in its place, so there's no need for that third argument. Now that's step 1. Step 2, add a new item on to the end. To do this, we could have used splice. We could have said start at the end, don't delete anything, and add this, but we can just use the push method instead. Todos.push, super simple. We can add a new item on right here, and I will say buy coffee. So now we have the third item removed, we have a new item on the end, and now we're going to remove the first item from the list. You could have used 2 different methods to get this done. You might have used shift, you might have used splice. Either way is going to work. We already explored splice, so we'll use shift instead. Todos.shift, we call it. It doesn't take any arguments, it just removes that item. Now, I didn't ask you to do anything with the removed item, so there's no need to do anything with the return value from shift, which would be the string order cat food. We can go ahead and remove the comments, save the file, and run our script to see if we got things done correctly. Over in the terminal, that would be node todo.js. When I run the script, what do I get? I get clean kitchen, do work, exercise, and buy coffee. So buy coffee is sitting here on the end, and order cat food and buy food, the first and third items, they have been removed successfully. So there we have it. Using these methods, we can manipulate our arrays. We're going to continue talking about arrays in the very next video. We're going to figure out how to loop over our arrays and do something for every single item. I'm excited to get to that. So let's go ahead and jump right in.